Cryptocurrencies are very promising technologies that offer quite a bright future of automated financial contracts and money that is independent of centralized authorities who may not have your financial best interest at the heart of their decision. That said, cryptocurrencies also have big problems that many people simply don't talk about. I'm not one of these people, and in this video, we're going to go over the energy consumption problems of cryptocurrency. We're going to go over the throughput and latency problems of cryptocurrency. And if you watch all the way to the end, you will learn what is the biggest problem cryptocurrencies face today. So be sure to lovingly, tenderly, gently smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. And let's get started. You're watching Finance Squared, and I'm your host, Derek West. And on Finance Squared, we love talking about everything personal finance related, including stocks, bonds, side hustles, and of course, cryptocurrencies, including realistic discussions on some of the problems inherent with cryptocurrencies. You know, with the good comes the bad, and we need to make sure we have discussions on both. So problems with cryptocurrency can be described as voluminous to some degree. Of the big cryptocurrencies, some of them have issues with the amount of energy it takes to perform transactions on them. For example, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and currencies like Dogecoin. So Bitcoin is a great way to send and receive value or money in layman's terms. But cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, and others, like everything else on Earth, don't operate for free. Bitcoins are generated by mining. Mining is the process of verifying transactions by solving hard math puzzles and adding new blocks to the chain, which ironically is why they call it a blockchain. Actually, that's not ironic at all. But doing all this requires a lot of power. Written testimonies presented before the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources in August 2018 claim that Bitcoin mining accounts for about 1% of the world's energy consumption. The mining of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is not just a solitary crypto nerd in his basement. Modern mining operations are large outfits utilizing specialized hardware. These are operations that professionally mine Bitcoin, and they're effectively mercenary outfits that use their computing power to mine rather than process data or host websites. Let's quantify this a little bit. An annual energy consumption is typically calculated in terawatt hours. This tracks the unit of energy equal to outputting 1 trillion watts for 1 hour, and it's used to track the annual energy consumptions of entire countries. At Cambridge University's Centers for Alternative Energy, they use an index called the Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index, or BECI, B-E-C-I, to calculate Bitcoin's energy consumption. BECI updates every half minute and provides an estimated energy consumption, plus or minus a few standard deviations. At the moment I'm producing this, the BECI for Bitcoin is around 139.38 terawatt hours, with an upper limit of about 479 terawatt hours and a lower limit of 43.52. Sort of a large range, I know. But if that average is to be believed, then Bitcoin currently uses more energy than Argentina, the Netherlands, and the United Arab Emirates. Some people even claim that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are anti-efficient, meaning that they were designed to be inefficient, which is, if you think about it, sort of true. The math puzzles that they solve to add more blocks to the chain, more transactions to the chain essentially, are supposed to be hard so that it's worth your while to solve them, and so that the price of Bitcoin always remains high. But the environmental footprint of Bitcoin is not the biggest problem of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. There are several problems with cryptocurrencies, and another one of them is the transaction speed. You see, human beings need speed to not be bored with the things that they're doing. There's an article from the Nielsen-Norman Group that explains that application response times determine the user's experience and thus how quickly they get bored with an interface. A user interface that operates at a 0.1 second response time provides the user with a feeling of the system reacting instantaneously, and thus keeping the user engaged. A 1 second response time keeps the user's flow of thought uninterrupted, although they start to notice the delay, and thus start to feel a little bit bored. A 10-second response time is when our patience starts to max out, go beyond this responsiveness, and the user is going to check out of whatever it is that's presented to him, and he'll at best perform other tasks while he's waiting for the current task that he's on to finish. And this is where a ton of cryptocurrencies fail, quite frankly. A lot of cryptocurrencies tout their transactions per second. There are several cryptocurrencies out there that claim that their per second transactions are greater than 100,000. And that number is thrown out casually these days. To be frank, that's a good metric to hit. Hopefully those numbers are still true once there are a critical mass of users for each of these sort of fledgling cryptocurrencies. But how quickly are each of these transactions performed? If the latency per transaction were down, could we get even more transactions per second? In order for a blockchain and its tokens and currencies to be fast, the transactions need to have low latency. Or in other words, you want the transactions to be verified and confirmed in split second. And the numbers for Bitcoin and Ethereum are frankly atrocious. Remember when we said that the response time of 10 seconds is the maximum that a user will tolerate before he becomes frustrated with the interaction? Well, Bitcoin can only process 7 transactions per second, with a transaction time of a whopping 60 minutes per transaction. Yikes, that's a good estimate too. Now, before all the crypto nerds jump in and say that the Lightning Network will allow for 10,000 transactions per second and a 1-minute transaction time, let me just say, I know, and good for them. But even still, that's not great compared to other networks and blockchains out there, and particularly non-centralized cryptocurrencies like the Visa network or even PayPal. And next up, we have Ethereum, which is capable of 25 transactions per second and a transaction time of 6 minutes. Again, not great. The hype around Ethereum and Bitcoin and other coins is their market cap per project, leaving almost no discussion time on the actual time it takes to complete a transaction using their technologies. Litecoin has a throughput of 56 transactions per second and a transaction time of 30 minutes. Again, yikes. Bitcoin Cash, a fork of Bitcoin, has a throughput of 300 transactions per second and a transaction time of 60 to 180 minutes. Bitcoin SV has a transaction time of 60 minutes and a throughput of 224 transactions per second. Monero has a throughput of, on average, 4 transactions per second, with some saying that it could have a throughput of up to 1,000 transactions per second and a transaction time of 30 minutes. Tezos has a throughput of 40 transactions per second and a latency of 30 minutes. Zcash, 27 transactions per second and a latency of 60 minutes. Decred has 14 transactions per second and a latency of 30 minutes. Bitcoin Gold has a throughput of 7 transactions per second and a latency of 60 minutes. Bitcoin Diamond has a throughput of 56 transactions per second and a transaction time of 60 minutes. All of those are not necessarily great. Are there any coins out there that approach fast latency times? Surprisingly, there are a few. Cardano claims 250 transactions per second and a 10-minute latency. Ontology claims 53,000 transactions per second and a 10-minute latency. Dash and Dogecoin can lay claim to a 6-minute latency while only able to process 35 transactions per second. Now, there are quite a few out there that manage to get to close to a minute or less. These are all cryptocurrencies moving in the right direction, in my personal opinion. For example, Ripple has a throughput of 1,500 transactions per second and a transaction time of 4 seconds. EOS has a 4,000 transactions per second throughput and 1.5 second latency. Stellar has a claim of 1,000 transactions per second and a 4-second latency. Neo has a 10,000 transactions per second throughput and a 15-second latency. And a real all-star is Nano, which has a 1,000 transactions per second throughput and a 0.14 second latency. Cosmos has a throughput of 10,000 transactions per second and a 2-second latency. So frankly, it's not all bad for some cryptocurrency. But obviously, the cryptos with the largest market shares need to get to work on improving their user experience. And some of these other cryptocurrencies that I talked about haven't necessarily been tested on their transaction times per second because they're frankly newer and do not have the user base of larger cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But that isn't even the worst problem facing Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. The problem that most of them face is that they are now seen as ways to store value than as ways to transact value. Let me explain what I mean. People, for various reasons, are putting a lot of stock, quote unquote, into cryptocurrencies, and thus investing a lot of money. Some people are speculating that inflation is going to be out of control, and with good reason, as a matter of fact. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has been hinting at that for a couple of weeks now, but anyone who is following monetary policy even slightly can understand this. Others think of it as a great way to invest money and get back solid returns. Others still believe in the technology and the promise it holds for the future. The first and the last reasons are legitimate reasons to invest in cryptocurrency. The second reason, definitely not. If you invest in any cryptocurrency simply because you're expecting a return on your investment, you don't understand what you're investing in, point blank. And frankly, you're better off putting your money on red in a casino. You see, investing in a certain crypto as a hedge against inflation is a good strategy as long as their prices remain high. And even buying during the dips will help, by the way. But what is your strategy once you've licked inflation? After all, you basically are at parity, right? If the currency was inflated and you're holding a currency that was not, basically, you simply just didn't lose ground. What is your plan to grow your wealth? And the technology is promising for the future, but each of these currencies and coins is not in and of itself a company providing a product or a service. Some people will argue with that point. And to a certain extent, they're right. These currencies are providing a new way to think about our money and our other financial instruments. But will simply holding onto these coins, these cryptocurrencies, will that increase your wealth any different than holding dollars or euros or even gold? The true answer to that is I'm afraid not. And while we're all excited by the promise that cryptocurrencies hold, we need to remember that they are not perfect, and they can't increase our wealth without providing value to others. One of the best ways to increase your wealth is by subscribing to personal finance YouTube channels that present realistic and sober information on all the financial topics of the day. Be among the first to join by subscribing to this channel and turning on post notifications so you don't miss great videos when they drop. And remember, a goal without a plan is a wish, and a goal with a plan and no action is a wish list. Take action on your personal financial goals today by getting hold of some low latency cryptocurrencies to help build your next business venture. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.